So in this assignment, we're going to use the trial balance from the previous assignment to create an income statement for May. And we're going to follow the formatting example from the textbook. And we've also got a note that says list expenses from largest to smallest. So you should have this form printed out, and you're going to fill this out by hand and then submit this onto Canvas. Now I've given you some hints. I've placed the label for revenue and for expenses, and I've placed the $3 signs to give you a hint about what numbers go where. So let's get started. So this is something you should know, and you will need to know. Which financial statement must be created first when you're creating the three financial statements? Well, it's the income statement. So we're going to use our trial balance to create an income statement for May. And like all financial statements, we need to start off with our three-line heading. So what goes on the first line? It's always the name of the company, so Angel's Delivery Service. The next line, it's the name of the statement, in this case the income statement. And then the third line, remember, is always date related. So is it a single day or is it a period of time? Notice it says we're going to create an income statement for May. So it needs to say for the month ended May 31st, 2029. Now when I was a student, I worried too much about formatting like dollar signs and what goes where in which columns. I don't want you to freak out about the formatting so much, even though that the three-line heading is something you need to know. But things like where do the underlines go and where do the dollar signs go, don't try to memorize that, because in the real world, if you're ever tasked with creating an income statement, you're just going to get the previous income statement that company made and follow their formatting, because each company uses a little bit different formatting. So using the formatting example from our book, notice we've got the label revenue, and then under that we're going to indent and write the name of the revenue account, delivery fees earned. So where did we get this delivery fees earned from? We got it from our trial balance. And if you forgot what type of account it was, you'd have to go back and look at the chart of accounts. And notice these two columns. This form just happens to have two columns for formatting purposes. But the important thing is these are not debit and credit columns. So do not get these confused, these two columns, with being debit and credit columns. They are not. They're just ways to format. Some companies will use 3 columns, and this company chooses to use 2 columns. So we're going to list the delivery fees earned, which, according to the trial balance, is $18,500. And this is not critical, but traditionally the first number in a column has a dollar sign. And then we're going to list the label expenses. And then according to the instructions, they wanted the expenses listed from largest to smallest. So we look at our trial balance. Which expense was the largest? It was salaries expense. And then $1,850 according to our ledger. Now you might be asking, well, why did they put this in the second column? Well, just to get the details away from the main numbers, which I'll just remind you in a little bit when we list all the expenses. So let's list the next expense. The next biggest was advertising expense, $800. And again, this is not super important, but notice that they have a dollar sign on the first number in a column, but not the second number. Again, that's nothing important to memorize. And then we've got gas expense for $750. And then our smallest expense is telephone expense at $400. Now we're going to add those up, and to show our readers that we're adding those up, we're going to put a thick underline there. And then we're going to indent our label called total expenses. We're going to indent it a little bit so it's easier to read. And now where do we put the total expenses? Again, this is just a formatting thing. You don't have to memorize this. But we're going to put the total expenses in the far right column. So why do they do that? Why do they have these expenses over here in the left column all by themselves, and then the revenues and total expenses in the far right column? Well, that's because most readers of the income statement are only interested in three things: total revenue, total expenses, and then our net income at the very bottom. So if we keep the details, which is the individual expenses, if we keep those in a second column, it kind of gets them out of the way of the reader, so they can just focus on the three big numbers: revenue, total expenses, and then net income, which we've not done yet. So now, what's the formula for the income statement? It's revenue minus expenses. So because we're going to do a mathematical operation, we put another thick underline, and then we're going to take 18,500 minus 3,800 gives us our net income. So let's put the label, and they have it over on the far left. It's not indented at all. And then 18,500 minus 3,800 gives us $14,700 of net income. And net income is also known as what? It's also known as profit. And then because we're done with that, we put a double underline at the very bottom. And then if you want to get technical about it, notice they've got a dollar sign for net income. So this really only has $3 signs. The top number in each column, and then the bottom line number, which is net income. Again, you don't have to memorize where the dollar signs go. It's not that big of a deal. So since we just created an income statement, what do you think? Is this company doing well? Well, it looks like they're doing pretty well. They got a net income. They've got a profit. Their largest expense is their salaries. And advertising expense is the second biggest expense. So maybe if they increase their advertising expense, maybe they could potentially generate even more business. Who knows? But that's something for them to think about.